Podcasts are hot right now. How do I know? Well, you're listening to one right now, aren't you? But you might be wondering, how on earth do I get my voice out there and start my own podcast? It all seems so intimidating. Between hosting and platforms and monetization, it can get real complicated real quick. Well, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. We started this podcast over 2 years ago, not knowing clue one on how to do it. So how do we do it? We did it with Anchor. Anchor is the free podcast app with creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on all the platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And everybody likes money, right? Well, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So go right now, download the free Anchor app, or go to Anchor FM to get started. It's the E-Commerce Minute, your daily dose of e-commerce, tech, and retail news with your hosts, Bart Mraz and John Suter. The E-Commerce Minute is a production of Sumo Heavy, a digital commerce consulting firm in Brooklyn, New York, and Philadelphia. Find us on the web at sumoheavy.com. It's the E-Commerce Minute, episode 605.
In today's episode, AC Moore exits bricks and mortar retail.
When AC Moore announced both a new chief executive and a retail marketplace earlier this year, it looked like the company was making some important moves to solidify its longevity in the crafting industry. Unfortunately, those efforts weren't very fruitful. New Jersey-based AC Moore, which has locations primarily on the East Coast, will close all of its 145 stores. Up to 40 locations and a distribution facility will be acquired by rival Michaels, which has a 1,300 store footprint and is the largest arts and crafts retailer in the U.S. The closed stores will be reopened under the new brand next year. AC Moore's website will also immediately stop accepting orders, but previous orders will be fulfilled. Further information about specific store closure sales will soon be posted on the AC Moore website. Now, this is a far cry from 2 years ago when the retailer invested heavily in e-commerce, acquiring online craft supplies retailer Blitsy and landed a partnership with the handcraft marketplace Zibbet. Growth plans also included offline expansion. That year, AC Moore opened a massive 27,000 square foot flagship in downtown Philadelphia, its first urban location, and said it would expand to more cities and into the West from its mostly suburban East Coast operations. But with intense competition from more popular craft retailers and the big e-commerce bullies, these expansions still didn't help the waning business. The company's exit from retail came during Thanksgiving week, just as most retailers were ramping up for Black Friday. What did you say, Bart? You had an alternative title for this show?
I did. AC Moore is no more.
AC Moore is no more. I actually think this is not good. I'm going to say this particularly I'm not an arts and crafts person, but I am an artist and a designer, and there are less and less places for you to just go to physically look and hold a pen or a brush or a canvas or anything related to an art supply. And AC Moore, even though I wasn't a fan, now all we have is
one of the last
Michaels.
ones left.
One of the last ones left.
Isn't there, what is it, Black? What was the other store? Like for artists?
Blick?
Blick.
There's Blick, but they're usually in cities or in some little hipster doofus towns, but there's none of that around me. There's Blick, and then there was Pearl. Pearl was the big one in Center City, Philadelphia, but I'm sure every other town is experiencing the same thing. It's not good, and the places now that you can buy art supplies, and I'm speaking strictly as an artist, I'm not a crafter, and I don't do scrapbooking, and I don't yarn and do all that stuff and buy cheap candles. But
you don't yarn?
I don't yarn, I don't candle, I don't scrap. But yeah, it's harder and harder to find physical art supplies. And the places that do sell it, obviously, are going to be a lot more expensive because they're trying to pay that rent, and they're not dealing on volume like these other chain stores are. So that is my artist perspective. What do you guys think?
Even before this happened, I remember being in AC Moore's like very recently over the past like probably 2 or 3 months and thinking like these stores are gigantic. Like how is this like sustainable? Because they're all so big when you go in and there's usually like 7 people in there.
Yeah, they are as big as
you.
They are as big as a supermarket. I know the ones around here are, and the one they opened in Center City, Philadelphia. I never did get the opportunity to visit, but 27,000 square feet is a lot of yarn and cheap candles. So
yeah, it's huge.
It's huge.
Over failed FYE store.
Ooh,
oh, is that what it was? Oh, yeah. Right. It's on Broad Street, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, that's a shame. That location seems to be doomed because that was FYA, and then it was a bunch of other things that never seemed. It's just a hard rent right there for retail. But yeah, I think their stores were too big. And Michaels, they sell the exact same thing. But I don't like it that Michael's is now the only game in town. But I guess that's just what's happening in the bricks and mortar retail sector in general.
Michael's is like really expensive compared to AC Moore.
It is. It is. And again, I'm only talking about the guy who goes there to buy pens and brushes and stuff. It's expensive, but there's no other place to buy it. I mean, I'm not going to go to Staples to buy art supplies.
No.
So, then you switch to online and for something as tactile like that, I mean, literally, you go to buy a pen, you want to try the pen out. It's like you buy, I don't know. It's just a pet peeve of mine. It's a real shame. And it's curious to note that this has happened. We mentioned in the article, there are 2 acquisitions. So the one was Blitsy. Blitsy basically looks like AC Moore on a website. It's art supplies, it's scrapbooks, it's gifts for kids, paper crafts, all that kind of stuff. But the other interesting thing, which we mentioned in a different podcast, was the acquisition of Zibbet. Zibbet is really cool because it's a place where it helps artists, makers, and creative entrepreneurs sell more. So basically, you can create a listing and then do like a multi-channel listing, which I thought was really awesome. But I don't know many people that have actually even heard of this thing. It's a great site.
I've never heard.
Yeah, you never heard of it, right?
No.
Nah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And it helps you. So they have their own marketplace. They have the Zibbet marketplace. You can also list to the AC Moore marketplace, which I guess will be absorbed. I don't know what's going to happen with that. You can create your own website. It's called a Stitch website. And you can also push your listings out to Etsy. So for crafters and these small businesses, I think it's great that you can push these out to different channels. But who's ever heard of this?
Yeah.
I didn't hear of it until we did the first podcast. Forgot all about it until now. We're doing this podcast. So, all right.
Yeah, Zibbet's, their website's really nice, Zibbet. It's like really
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So I don't know what's going to happen with those 2 properties. Maybe they'll be spun off or maybe Michael's will buy those too. Who knows? Remains to be seen. So this joins more bricks and mortar retailers closing in 2019. Several legacy retailers have closed as well. Payless, Gymboree, Dress Barn, Charlotte Russe, Charming Charlie. The list goes on and on.
But Charlotte Russe is making a comeback. I saw.
What is Charlotte Russe? That's the ladies' clothing.
Yeah, it's like pretty. Like if you thought Forever 21 was cheap, Charlotte Russe said, "Hold my beer," because Charlotte Russe is made a lot cheaper than Forever 21. But I mean, that's why they thrive, because their stuff is so cheap and it's like going out stuff. But anyway, they closed. It was like really dramatic when they closed. Like everyone was super shook. And then they were like, just kidding. And they opened up like stores randomly in random places. Like I was at the Cherry Hill Mall the other day. There's a Charlotte Russe.
What is Charming Charlie? I didn't know what that was either until it closed.
Let me tell you about this store.
It's a PA company. The headquarters was down the street from you.
It is a store of like women's accessories. And first of all, these stores are gigantic. Second of all, they're organized by color. Like visually, they were the most stimulating stores I have ever been in my life. But they were like, you couldn't find anything because there was so much inventory. And although it was organized really nicely, it was so overwhelming. Like you couldn't even see an employee. They were like around the corner. That's how big the stores were. Like if you even needed help, forget it. Because like you couldn't even find anyone because the stores were so big.
Yeah. I think a lot of these big chains suffer from that. They think, we're going to put a big store here and the customers will come. When in fact, AC Moore probably could have been half the size, and probably Charming Charlie suffered from the same thing, where it's like sometimes having everything is not a good thing. I mean, and I even look like at Dick's Sporting Goods, how their stores are still open. You go to Dick's Sporting Goods, those stores are, I'm just going to guess, I don't know, 10,000 to whatever.
They're huge.
There's never anybody in there. People, you go, like if you're looking for golf, like I used to go in there and buy all my golf stuff in there, go to the golf department, you turn around, there's like nobody in the rest of the store. It's like, hello.
Yeah. I mean, then you go to the other side of experience. Remember when we walked into Untuckit and it was just like a beautiful experience, right? And then just ship stuff to you.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of where I was kind of the rabbit hole I was going down to, is that I think we're going to see a lot more of this experiential / bricks and clicks type retail, which would be a lot more successful, a lot more profitable. And as Bart's example, Untuckit, where, there's some inventory there, but they're basically saying, this is where you come to try, touch and feel and do all that. I believe on that same block that you're referring to in Center City, there's also a Warby Parker store, which is doing kind of the same thing there.
Right. So it's Bonobos.
There's Bonobos. Yeah, that block there is a great example.
Indochino's there, I think, or whatever.
Yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. And there's a North Face store on that block as well. And I think you're going to see, and again, these are all small footprint stores that have a nice depth of selection, but probably not so much inventory, so to speak. And I think a lot of these places can learn a lesson from that. Now, things like arts and crafts and art supplies are hard because there's so many, it's like, where do you put all the little beads that you go to buy? You can't just stock 5 beads. You got to have all the beads.
5 beads.
But using AC Mortar as an example, there's one very close to my house. I mean, do we need 2 rows of plastic flowers? Do we really?
I was literally just going to make that point. The other thing about AC Mortar is that they have so much junk in their stores, like junk, like random little like gadgets at the front that nobody buys. And like,
you never know when you're going to need a piece of like that for arts and crafts.
That's so true.
And then there's the whole framing department. And then in the last couple of years, they redid my AC Mortar by me, and there's a whole toy department. I didn't really think that was necessary.
Oh, God.
But again, they're saying, okay, we've got, 10,000 square feet or whatever it is. And they kept trying to make it more of a department store, and it didn't work, I guess.
Well, yeah. And when you get away from your niche, which is like what's big right now, is just niche, small, specific stores. When you start to get away from that and start selling a hodgepodge of things, which is what failing department stores are doing, like it's no surprise that it's not going to work out.
Yep. The department store model doesn't exactly work anymore. All right, I'm going to tell you about today's sponsor. It's Sumo Heavy. Sumo Heavy publishes a weekly newsletter. It's filled with our latest blog posts, e-commerce news and tips, as well as e-commerce events and job listings. We've also got a great feature called Our Latest Obsession, which is our one favorite thing we found trawling the internet in that week. Each jam-packed email drops bright and early at 8 a.m. every Friday morning. So don't get left out. Go right now to bit.ly/Sumo Heavy Newsletter. That's bit.ly Sumo Heavy Newsletter. Once you're there, you can subscribe, and you can also read all the great past issues. So go right now to bit.ly/Sumo Heavy Newsletter. And just something we'll point out, we also publish some opinion pieces that we post on Medium. And we have a recent article written by Brittany. She did an article called The High Costs of Fast Fashion. You go check that out. I'd give you the URL, but it's got a lot of numbers and stuff in there. So just go on Medium. It's called The High Cost of Fast Fashion. All right, we'll close it up with a little stat time. The AFCI study reports that 62%, nearly 2/3 of U.S. households participate in one crafting hobby. Which one is yours, Bart?
Knitting.
Why did I know you were going to say that? Why did I just feel it in my bones that Bart was going to say knitting?
I don't see him as a scrapbook guy.
It's true.
And according to Coresight
crocheting,
research,
my friend, crocheting.
Oh,
crocheting, yes, crocheting.
That's
Knit
classier.
1, purl 2. And according to Coresight research, there were 40% more closures already this year than all of last year. And the fabric, craft, and sewing supplies stores industry has fallen at an annualized rate of 2.1% to $4.2 billion, including a 4.1% decline in 2019 alone, because people would rather sit on their phones. How sad. Guys, got anything else?
Nope.
All right, that's your e-commerce minute for today. We'll see you on the internet tomorrow. That's it for today's show. If you like the show, do us a favor and subscribe, or leave us a review on iTunes. And don't forget, you can now listen to the e-commerce minute on your Amazon device. Just add e-commerce minute to your flash briefing. And finally, if you have a comment or suggestion, or just want to say hi, find us on social media at Sumo Heavy.